So I just watched Shane Dawson's new series on Jake Paul called Inside the Mind of Jake Paul. And this is a series, or a, air quotes, documentary on the infamous YouTube star Jake Paul, who is also brothers to Logan Paul, who both of these characters have sort of been widely hated on YouTube as a platform pretty much since they got on because of their crass, rude, and idiotic, moronic behavior that has pretty much started since they started. And there's a lot of speculation around them and what their motives are, and about their drama, because they don't really ever come fully out about the drama, and then the drama starts to kind of just permeate, circulate, and just get everyone that's involved views. And I guess the series that Shane Dawson has created is mainly just about that. It's just about the drama that's surrounding Jake Paul and trying to explain or rationalize why he's doing the things that he's doing. And I'll say this right off the bat. This show is awful. This show is one of the most embarrassing things that I have seen this year, and that's kind of unfortunate because I like Shane Dawson. I'll go on the record and say that I think he's a likable guy. He wears his emotions on his sleeves, and he's very sympathetic because of that. You feel for him. You feel bad for him. And his backstory, his past has been kind of rocky, and so you feel for him there too, and he somehow is super charismatic and likable about it. And so I like Shane Dawson. I think he seems like a very good guy, but he clearly has no clue what he's doing with this series. And maybe he has no clue what he's doing, period. But I wouldn't argue that. I mean, I've seen some of his, conspiracy theory videos, and those are pretty basic. Just him talking straight to the camera with some eerie music while he explains some weird conspiracy theories. So pretty basic videos that are kind of hard to drop the ball on, but as far as this quote-unquote documentary series goes, it seems like he's a complete amateur. I know he's directed and starred in and possibly written a movie, but I haven't seen it because I've heard it's embarrassing. And this documentary series is pretty embarrassing. It's too bad. I went into it sort of expecting something, and what I got out was a bunch of nothing. I mean, if you could make 7+ hours of runtime boring, he's found a way to do it. I didn't think it was possible, but man, there's really a lot to get into with this show. So I'm gonna start off from the top here and say that this shouldn't have been called a documentary. It's 8 episodes long, all between 40 minutes and an hour and 40 minutes. So, the show is excessive. It's, again, over 7 hours of footage. And the reason why I say it shouldn't be called a documentary is because it's basically a series of interviews and house tours of the rich and famous people that he is going to interview. And that is honestly the whole show. Literally every episode is Shane talking to somebody in an interview style, super laid back format, or touring their house. That is quite literally every every single episode. That is literally the entire series. It's just him talking to somebody and them answering his questions until he feels satisfied that he got the answers he wanted out of them. And that's it. It's so bare bones. Like, when I watch a documentary, I want to see the subject of the documentary, which we only see for 3 out of 8 of the episodes. I want to learn about the subject of the documentary, which I feel like we did in the most surface level way possible, being that Shane basically just shows and digs up his new and old YouTube videos, which are all very public and very widely seen, so there's not really much new there. And then he basically just talks to them, the people that he wants to, about their beef. So he basically just gets people's quote-unquote truths out about the beef. And it's supposed to be very revealing and very in-depth, and it doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel that way at all to me, because we don't see any of the research process. And that's what I was talking about when I say I want to see certain things out of the documentary. All we see is the interviews and Shane watching some YouTube videos and then taking house tours. We don't see any of his research process. In the descriptions of his videos, he says, and even in the videos, he says that he did a very intensive research on Jake Paul. He knows all there is to know about him. And we don't get to see that. So when the series is going forward, it feels like Shane is sort of learning everything there is to know about him just by talking to the people that were close to him. It doesn't feel like he actually did any research on Jake Paul in the slightest. And I mean, that's not to say that he didn't, because he probably did. It's just that I think one of the biggest issues with the series is that Jake Paul is not an interesting person, and he doesn't really have anything in his life that's worth really diving in depth about, especially not for this long. I mean, Shane says he did weeks, months of research and preparation for this, but all that we learn about Jake Paul is that his parents were hard on him. He wrestled in high school and played football. He got a camera from his dad, and then him and his brother started filming videos on it, and then they were super competitive because his mom and dad were hard on him, and then they're famous now. That is, like, literally their whole story. All the research that Shane pretends takes months, I think anybody could have dug up within one day. Like, the things that we learn about him are so paper thin and bare bones that I really, after this series, I really don't think that this was worth doing. Especially not for this amount of time, which I've mentioned a bunch, but we'll get into in a minute. Because it's just, this character, Jake Paul, is so lackluster. There's just nothing to know about him. He's just every college jock that you can think of. His parents were hard on him. He's super competitive, and he wants to be famous. Like, that is just basically the definition of a jock, and we all know that jocks are just not interesting as people. And at no point in the show does Shane make Jake Paul anything more than that. And there's a couple of episodes when he went to his house and he was seeing him behind the scenes, and that is like perfect opportunity to see this person for who they really are and see what makes them tick, see what they do in their downtime, see what their social life is like. And yet it's no different than his videos. His social life and his personal life is almost identical to what is in his vlogs, which is the point of a vlog, I guess, to show their life. So why even tackle the subject matter if it's so uninteresting? I don't get that at all. And I've already alluded to this a lot, but the runtime is a huge issue for me. Huge issue. This should not have been over 7 hours long. This is insane. Again, I hate to call this a documentary because it's not. And if this is what people are touting as the pinnacle of quality on YouTube, then we're in trouble, because this is insane. I can't believe that Shane allowed this to be this long. He said from the get-go it was going to be 8 episodes, and then he dropped the first one and it was over 40 minutes. And everyone was like, whoa, this is going to be a really freaking long series. And I can understand a long runtime for something that's interesting. I get it. Some of my favorite movies, like the Lord of the Rings movies, are over 3 hours long. To watch the 3 Lord of the Rings movies, it takes literally like 12 hours. But Jake Paul is not as interesting as Lord of the Rings. Not even close. They're not even on the same spectrum. Lord of the Rings is like the best trilogy of all time, and Jake Paul is a college jock. So why? Why did you think that this was a good idea, Shane? Honestly. Like, every episode is over 40 minutes long, and the last one is an hour and 45 minutes. Why? You could have cut this series in half, and it would literally have the exact same impact. It would not change in the slightest. You could literally cut it down even more than halfway, and it would have the same impact. Most of the series, you just learn the same thing over and over again, just from different people's mouths. He goes and talks to the former manager of the Jake Paul's corporation, and he talks to his ex-girlfriend, and he talks to his current girlfriend, and he talks to a therapist, and he just keeps going around talking to these people who literally say the same thing over and over and over again. They just repeat what each other says until it's over. And then when Jake Paul finally gets his interview segment, the hour and 45-minute interview, he just says the same things that pretty much everyone else say. It's insane. It's insane that Shane didn't recognize that he was literally repeating information for 7 hours. I mean, when I edit my videos, normally what I do is I stand in front of a camera for something like 20-30 minutes, and I just talk. I just ramble, similar to what I'm doing now. But in the editing process, I go in and I trim out half, maybe more than half of what I talked about, because I was just rambling. I just rambled on and talked about some of the same things over and over again. I'd retread information, and so I'd cut all that out. And then I have a 20-minute video cut down to a 7-minute video, and then I add in some sprucing, and that's it. And, I mean, I'm not saying that my videos are great or perfect, because they're not, but I think at least I recognize that rambling on and repeating information is not interesting. And I don't think Shane does, because that's all this series is, for 7 hours. Another thing that really irritates me is, I already alluded to this earlier, but most of the show is interviews and house tours, and that format is, I guess, fine for YouTube, because, you know, everyone on YouTube is pretty surface level, pretty boring, and all they want to see is somebody else's house. So who cares, I guess? Shane touring Jake Paul's mansion is fine for some people, but it does not make for an interesting documentary series. Why, in this series called Inside the Mind of Jake Paul, are we touring his house? I mean, Shane tries to kind of bring it in later, but it feels so forced and heavy-handed at the end, when he's like, you seem very childish with, like, your house has like Legos in the walls and everything. It's very childish, when Jake already had said that, you know, the kids love it, and he did it because he knew kids would be touring the house and it would be kind of cool. I mean, who cares? Legos are not an exclusively child-friendly thing. A lot of adults I know love just building sets because it's, like, therapeutic. And that's not interesting, again, to watch somebody walk around a house when you're trying to learn about the subject of the documentary. And this happens multiple times. He even goes to Jake Paul's quote-unquote ex-girlfriend's house, which is absolutely massive, and they just tour around that house for the first, like, half of the episode. You don't learn anything. They just tour a house. It's insane. Why did you include this in your documentary? Why not cut all of the stupid house tours out and then have it as bonus footage in one video or something? Or say, hey, we actually toured around this house with this person. If you want to see it, click on the link below and it will take you to a video where we're touring their house. Make it something separate than your stupid documentary series. It's insane that I have to say this, that in a documentary series about a person, we have not one, not two, but 3 house tours. It's craziness. It's craziness. Who cares if their house is big? I don't. Who cares if they have a lot of money? I don't. Just get to the point. And that it sort of wraps back around to how long the series is. I think the constant house tours, the constant saying, I'm nervous, where are we going? I don't know where we are, while they're driving around in a car, is not interesting in the context of this documentary. If you really wanted to make this straightforward, you cut the fluff. What we get feels like the first draft of an edit where they just make a skeleton of all their footage, cut out the really uninteresting stuff, the stuff where they cut, the stuff which they don't always cut out. Sometimes they literally have the cut of the camera in the video, which is nuts to me. But when you're editing something, you make a first draft, you make a rough skeleton out of all the footage, cutting out like you clearing your throat or getting a drink or stuff like that. You cut that stuff out, and it seems like he did that, but then he made no progress after that. He cut just the really fluffy stuff, the stuff that literally nobody puts in their videos unless it's for a joke, and then he just left in literally everything else. Why? There's so much of this series that could easily be cut down or just completely cut out. You cut out the house tours, you cut out Shane going to places, and you just get to the point. Just cut straight to interviews. Say, we're about to go here, we're going to interview this person, here's what I expect. And then boom, cut to the interview. It's that easy. That's all you needed to do to make it like 2 times more interesting. But again, the subject matter of the documentary isn't interesting. So even then, it might still not work for me. But that brings me to the actual interview segments, which I found to be incredibly unprofessional. I mean, I guess there is something to be said about just having a laid-back conversation, rather than a uptight kind of interview. But I think there's a right way and a wrong way to approach it, and I think Shane took the wrong way. Because every interview he does, which he does in every episode, he's sitting on a couch with the person, and they're both just kind of leaning on their elbows or just kind of chilling and then talking. Which, again, there's something to be said for that. It may get the subject to be more comfortable and actually answer questions more honestly if they feel like they're in a kind of laid-back, comfortable environment. But the way that Shane shoots and frames these interviews is incredibly obnoxious, because the microphone that they're using is, I believe, I mean, it's not confirmed, a shotgun microphone on top of the camera. Just a basic, probably just a Rode microphone on the hot shoe of the camera, which is fine if you're shooting with like a prime lens or something like that, because they're clearly not. They're shooting with a zoom lens, so anytime the cameraman, whose name I believe is Andrew, zooms in and out, it's obvious, you can hear it, and it like clunks in and out, and anytime he changes the aperture and brightens or darkens a scene, you can hear it. It makes a very obnoxious sound because they have the microphone on top of the camera, so you can hear all of that. It's incredibly annoying every single time, and he does it in the middle of interviews. So people will be talking, and you just hear this shunk, shunk of the camera zooming in and out. Why? You have all this money. You have all this money, and you didn't invest in a boom mic, so you didn't get those obnoxious camera zooms, and you didn't invest in 2 cameras, so you can have a lockdown shot of the interviewer and the subject. Why am I seeing this documentary series where the cameraman has the mic on board and then is panning in between the interviewer and the subject? That is so incredibly unprofessional. Why? Why did you do this? Why did you think that this would be a good idea? It looks terrible. It sounds terrible. It makes everything so unprofessional. And it seems like they didn't denoise the audio. Excuse me. So most of it is like this noisy environment where you hear people talk and then you just hear this like in the background because they didn't use a denoiser. They just plugged in the audio as is and then left it. How is this considered the pinnacle for YouTube content? This is not quality in the slightest. This is all just trash. This is stuff I did when I was like 15. And it's happening in a semi-professional documentary series. What is happening? And I think one of the biggest things that a lot of people are upset about is that the music that's used throughout this series is that pretty much the same music that he uses in like the conspiracy videos. So it's this eerie kind of atmospheric royalty-free music, and he's using it while people are talking about their friend or their ex-boyfriend, and it feels incredibly out of place and slightly manipulative throughout the whole thing. And there's even a point in the last episode where he has a title card flash on screen and says, "I'm not going to be using any music because there's very raw and sensitive topics being talked about. So I'm not using music out of respect for Jake Paul." And I was like, why not just do it? Why do I have to hear about it? You could literally just do it. So I found that to be borderline manipulative. I wouldn't say it was as big a problem for me as it was for a lot of people, but that was just another issue with this. Really, I don't have anything good to say about this documentary series. I found it amazingly uninteresting, and yet somehow I watched the whole thing. I found it to be unprofessional and lazy and very little effort put in. I think the research segment of the documentary, if there was any, would have been interesting to see, but the biggest issue I think with it is that the subject matter of the documentary, Jake Paul, is the most uninteresting, lackadaisical, bland person I've ever met in my whole life, and I haven't even met him. He just seems to be the most uninteresting person, because the whole series is dedicated to him, 8 episodes, and they barely squoze out 3 episodes with him. Barely. One episode is basically just a house tour. Another one is basically just sitting on a couch and talking for an hour. He's just the most uninteresting person. So why did this happen? Why not make this just 1 episode and 1 interview? Why did we have to make this 7 hours long? I just don't get that. I don't know. I don't know how to feel, because again, this is being touted as like the pinnacle of quality content on YouTube, and it's just not. It's so uninteresting. It's so poorly done and lacks interest or effort. I can't believe that this is being perceived as quality. This is insane to me. I think we need to expect more out of people on YouTube and not less, because it's a new program, a new platform, and we need to kind of say that we want more. We need to not take this as quality. So, yeah, that's my rant on Inside the Mind of Jake Paul, the most uninteresting 7 hours of video I've ever watched. But that's everything. That's it. That's all I wanted to talk about, and that's it for this episode, episode 9. I'll see you next week for episode 10, or potentially in 2 weeks, because I don't know when I'm going to do this next. But anyway, that's it. Goodbye.